I think I kind of know most of you, maybe I've talked to you, but just before I get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself so it's not so foreign as to who I am. I am a senior at Grand Valley, and I'm losing my voice, and I'm going to be graduating in April, so I'm really excited. And I'm an international relations and political science major, so we'll see what happens with that. I'll probably have to move, so you might see me in another city. So the topic that we were kind of given today was to talk about common ground. And this is something that little did I know, so as I was thinking about the topic, I didn't really think that I had a lot of experience with it. But I realized that it's something that I've kind of been accustomed to dealing with since I was little. And it kind of starts with my parents. So one of the biggest things when I was little, there were two things that my parents did and two distinct memories that I have that I never realized really carried on to other things that I did. One of the biggest things was that we would have these, I call them kitchen debates, and they were very formal debates, which most people are like, that doesn't make sense. I was telling my boyfriend about this, and he's like, a formal debate? Maybe you should use the word informal. That doesn't sound right. I said, no, they were formal debates. My parents loved watching the news, and we would watch together. I was the youngest by quite a bit, so I was kind of almost like an only child. And we'd sit and watch the news together, and I started to get more opinionated as time went on, and we'd want to talk about the issues. And so we'd kind of be in our kitchen, because we have this island, and we'd all stand around it, and we'd be talking. And what would usually happen is we'd get really passionate, and things would quickly devolve into just kind of like no one listening, and we'd argue back and forth and cut people off, and it just really didn't work. So my mom, being the diplomatic person that she is, said, well, here, let's all take some pieces of paper, and you can write down what it is that you want to say or the points you want to make. And we're going to go around very formally, and each person's going to get their time to talk. So I got used to kind of sitting there and listening, and it was hard for me at first because I was really excited about it, and I was like, oh, I want to respond to that, I want to respond to that. But I learned that, okay, if I want to respond, I'm going to write down what I want to say, because it's probably going to be a little more intelligent if I write it down instead of just lashing out and kind of giving my first initial response. So I kind of got this feeling of being able to kind of sit and listen and understand what those other people were saying before I kind of just jumped right in and gave my opinion. And this is something that kind of carried on into my future life, which I'm going to talk about. The other big thing that I learned from my parents, and this was kind of a funny experience always for me, and this was more when I was really little. We'd go grocery shopping, and my parents would just be talking to someone and be like, how do you know that person? They'd be smiling, chatting with them over the produce. And they're like, oh, I don't know, I just met them, they seem really nice, we were just talking about whatever. And I was always so confused. I was like, how did you meet this person? And somehow my parents always found a way to kind of connect with someone. And they always found something that was similar, whether it was like the oranges that they were talking about or, bigger things with, we'd go to like parties and family events. Oh, well, this person went to the same place that I went to, or this person is interested in this same topic that you are. They were really good at making connections. And it's something that I feel like kind of carried on, again, like I said, in my future life. So when I got to college, I obviously love political science and international relations, so that's what I decided to study. And I took a class my freshman year about the Islamic Middle East, because I decided I was going to do something that I never really knew much about. I grew up in a Christian conservative home, and I was like, I'm going to do the opposite of what I know. So I jumped in and started learning about it, and I was fascinated. And the biggest thing that fascinated me about the Middle East was that there was a lot of, I feel like, misunderstandings. I would say that me and maybe other people can relate to this, but I feel like a product of 9/11 a little bit. Some of the ideas or concepts that I have about people in the Arab world or in the Middle East kind of come as a result of that. And so it may or may not be true stereotypes or true impressions, and I really felt like learning more about that region gave me a better understanding. So this kind of leads on to the main portion of what I want to talk about and where I feel like I experienced the most common ground, or where I learned the most about how to connect with other people that are completely different from me. So through my studies about the Middle East, I was fortunate enough, they do a program called Model Arab League, and it's awesome, I love it. It's basically like Model UN, so if you're not familiar with that, it's kind of a simulation of the real Arab League or the real UN. And I loved it, and so the organization that kind of sponsors that also sponsors a trip to go to Saudi Arabia. And they work with the Saudi government. It kind of is all expense paid, and they take a group of students over, and we meet with diplomats and business people and college students and kind of just learn more about the region, because they also saw that there was some misunderstanding or some disconnect between the two countries. And so they thought, well, what better thing to do than to take students who are usually pretty open to whatever, and it's a good learning experience. So 2 years ago, over winter break, I went to Saudi Arabia. There were 8 students, and it was quite a culture shock for me. So even though I'd studied the Middle East, I had a lot of preconceived notions about what was going to happen and what I was going to experience. The biggest thing as a woman was I had to wear the abaya, which is, if you don't know what it is, it's not a burqa. A lot of people go, oh, you're wearing the burqa? I was like, no. It's just a giant, I forgot it at home today. I was going to bring it and show you. But it's a giant black robe. If you're familiar with Harry Potter, it kind of looks like a Harry Potter robe. You need something to refer to. And then I also had to wear the hijab the entire time. So this is very different from my upbringing of being very opinionated, and I'm going to wear what I want, and I want to do what I want, and I'm very independent. So it was quite an adjustment to have to wear something that I felt like, initially I felt like I was kind of less than the people that I was with because I was covered and I didn't feel like I was being seen. But all these preconceived ideas kind of got thrown out the window when I got there because of the experiences that I had. And this is where I learned, I would say, 3 big things about common ground. So the first thing that I really learned was that you need to be open and honest with those people that you meet with, and you have to go in with a non-judgmental attitude. Those preconceived ideas that I had to throw them out. It wasn't going to work if I was going to go into a room with other students or even a diplomat or somebody really high up, if I was going to come in with an idea of what I thought that they were going to say or who I thought they were going to be. So an experience, I guess, that kind of relates to that is as we got to have dinner with this woman and her family. And she was the first woman kind of part of the Shura Council, which is a portion of the government. And she had kind of like a parliament, but without actual powers, just kind of like giving people consultation. So she was one of the first women. So she obviously was much more independent. But what was interesting is she had a daughter, and then her daughter's friend was there, and then she had 2 sons. And we had some, at dinner, it's a great place to bond over things. You love the food, you get to eat, you get to talk, really good conversation. And talking to the women, the 2 girls, was fascinating. So when we met them, we were at their home, so none of us were wearing the abaya. So for me, that was a little bit more comfortable. I was like, okay, I feel like I can talk a little bit more openly with them. But I went in thinking that they were going to be women who kind of just wanted to maybe submit or stay with the values that they were given, and didn't realize that I actually have a lot in common with them. And it started out at the very surface level, I would say, of, oh, what's your favorite TV show? Oh, you love watching Dexter? I love Dexter. That's a great show. And I'm like, I know, in the Middle East, it's kind of less than you'd think in like Saudi Arabia that someone's watching a show about Dexter. But they did. And it was fascinating to kind of talk about those very surface things, or what's your favorite music, or what do you like to do in your spare time? And it started to kind of go deeper than that. And one of the things is, one of the women was really interested in being a young businesswoman, like an entrepreneur. She had all these ideas, and we talked about, she wants to start her own business, like a bakery. And it was fascinating. I was like, I didn't know that you felt like you had the ability to do that. Because I came in with this idea that women were just kind of seen as lesser in society. And that was completely turned over. When I came into this conversation, I had these ideas, and they were gone at the end. And the other woman who was like her friend, she actually was going to medical school to be a doctor. And she wanted to be, again, I had this idea going in that you couldn't be a doctor, that she was going to have to get married and have children, and that was all that she was seen as being valued for. So I think that through that experience, I learned that there really isn't those. I can have stereotypes and maybe ideas of going in, but if I'm going to have a valuable conversation with someone, it's not really beneficial on my part to kind of come in with these ideas or like, well, this is what they're going to be like. Because usually they're going to surprise you, whoever you're talking to, and it's going to be completely opposite. And I think kind of related to that is that I have these people who were very obviously different from me. They lived in another country, in another culture, and it was quite obvious. But I think that, kind of coming back to what my parents said, I think that this can be carried on to other things. My parents were very open people. Going to the grocery store, they're in the same culture, they're in the same city maybe, in the same grocery store, they might even know this person somehow, but they still were open and non-judgmental of the people that they met. And I think that you don't have to be in another culture or be in another country to understand that you can be open and honest and that you can find common ground with those other people. The other thing that I kind of learned, so the second thing that I feel like was the biggest general truth I would say that I learned, was that you just have to talk to people and be present when you're talking to them. And so kind of how this relates, a couple of these experiences, one of them relates actually to the girl that I met who wanted to be a young businesswoman. A couple days later, they came back over to our hotel, the kids, and they hung out with us. It was New Year's Eve, and we're like, okay, this is fun, we're going to have a good time. New Year's Eve in Saudi Arabia is very different, in case you're wondering. It's not the same thing. They don't even celebrate it, really. But I learned that, so we continued kind of talking about all of these different things, but the biggest thing I learned was you have to just be present in that moment. And I didn't bring any pictures, but I have a picture of me and her play. I know how to play the piano. I played one since a kid. And I was playing a song on the piano. And she came down and sat next to me, and I taught her how to play the song. And it was one of those moments where I felt like it was a bonding moment without even having to talk. So yeah, we had these conversations, and it was really beneficial. I learned a lot. But just being with someone and being somewhere where they are, kind of meeting them where they're at, is most beneficial. I think that you can find common ground with a piano, playing, baseball, or whatever it is that you are comfortable doing. I think those hobbies and things that we love to do can really kind of bring other people together. So it was one of those moments where I was like, I didn't even, I feel like I had to keep asking, because we were kind of taught before we went, ask questions, you're going to learn a lot, make sure they're good questions, and be ready to listen, and have follow-up questions. And I was pleasantly surprised that I didn't really have to even say anything. I just kind of had to sit next to her and learned a lot about what she loved and how she worked and what kind of ways that I could connect with her. The other thing that was just interesting, somewhat related to that, is last night kind of prepping for this talk, I was like, well, I'm going to go back. I have made a video. One of my friends shot video clips of different conversations that me and the other delegates, or fellows, I guess, we were kind of a fellowship, would have in the car when we were driving between our meetings. And it was fascinating, the conversations that we would have. I just think that being in experiences, and this kind of leads to my third point, being in those new experiences that are maybe outside your comfort zone helps open up a dialogue that you really didn't think you had before. The conversations that we had were very different than the conversations I would have had with someone maybe who hadn't been to that country. We were able to kind of relate with each other about all the different, and share the different experiences and conversations that we would have. And really, I could see, because these were kind of chronological, so I was watching them, and our opinions somewhat shifted as time went on, and we were less likely to kind of go back to those stereotypes of, well, this is what they were like, this is what they. It was never, it kind of turned into, well, what could we do together with them? And it was a very different conversation at the end. So that's kind of my final point, is that the important part is we need to try new things, and you need to be bold and put yourself in those positions that are maybe uncomfortable. I think that could be, like I did, I went to another country, and I put myself wearing this outfit that I was very uncomfortable in at first. I'm not uncomfortable anymore. I actually think it's pretty comfortable. It's pretty nice. But it's actually pretty convenient because I didn't have to wear all this stuff, so it's nice. The guys all had to wear suits. I was like, this is nice. I don't even have to do my hair. I literally, anyway. But it was really one of those things where putting myself outside of my comfort zone helped me kind of get a little, okay, so this is what it's like to be a woman in Saudi Arabia. Okay, I think I kind of get it more. And along with those other parts of talking and being open and being honest, that kind of together molded into this experience that helped me feel like I understood this culture more fully. And I think that, again, that doesn't have to be traveling to another country. So maybe you're an introvert and you're like, oh, I don't really like to talk to people. Smile at somebody at the store. I think it's really nice. Say hi or just walk by and say, oh yeah, that looks fun. Just opening yourself up and being willing to talk to other people, whether it's your neighbor. The other thing I've learned, as I was talking about this with friends, I was thinking, well, it's interesting because that person who lives next door to me had a really different childhood than me. And they might have the same appearance as me, they might look like me, they might seem like they're exactly like me, that they fit in this box. They grew up in West Michigan. That's not necessarily true. They may have had a completely different childhood than me and different experiences. Maybe they went to another country and I don't even know it because I've never talked to them. The only way that we're going to really fully become more a unified people or more understanding of each other is by being open, talking, and putting ourselves in those experiences where we're not really sure what to do, because you kind of learn as you go. And I think what this means for us as leaders or young leaders, I think why this is important is that we really need to understand, if we're going to be put in that position of leadership, we need to understand the people that are around us. Because I really think that us and them mentality isn't necessarily the most productive thing. I think if you understand, instead of us and them, but it's just us, I think it's a little bit easier to kind of maybe come to a better solution or make a better decision. And as a leader, I've learned that I need to put myself in those situations with people and not necessarily be distant or away from them. So with that, I think that I kind of challenge everybody to maybe do something that's a little bit outside your comfort zone today or this week. Got spring break, so maybe we're all going somewhere new anyway. But I think that's a good challenge to kind of put yourself in that situation where you might not know what's next. So, thank you.
Can I just comment real fast? You don't get to sit down that quickly. In fact, I do think if anybody has any questions, would you be open to them? You know, one thing you said, Lizzie, that really impressed me is that leaders are present to other people. They're not distracted by texting, by their cell phone, or by the TV show over here, or by the radio over there, or by looking to see who's more important in the room. Leaders are present. And I thought you did such a great job talking about how you were present for them, they were present for you, and that's how the understanding came about. Good job.
Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, what do you think defines a Saudi Arabian? What makes them excited about their own culture?
I think one of the things, so I was saying, I meant watch these videos, and one of the other students who was on the trip was saying, he was from the South, and he said, it's so similar to Southern hospitality. Every single person we met was so welcoming, and was so willing to give us food and drinks, and was like, here, don't leave, and wanted to talk to us, and was very open and wanted to share their house. And I think that I would say is very a defining point. I'm working on a project right now where I'm interviewing Saudi students, and it's interesting because most of them I ask, well, what do you miss about home? And they say their family. And I think that the biggest thing that is important to them is their family and their kind of unification as a culture even. They're kind of, I think this is common in the Middle East, but like grandma and grandpa don't necessarily move out of the house when you stay home when you get married. So I think that family is probably most important.
Question.
Yeah.
And maybe you can't think of a good example of this, but you kind of talked about like the problem of bringing a lot of preconceived notions into like different relationships or conversations. Were there any like specific examples you have, like of the cost of what that looks like? What the downside of that? I'm curious if there were any interactions that you remember where people were bringing a lot of those in, and there was definitely a downfall in the conversation there.
I think some of the first conversations that all of us, because there were 4 girls and 4 guys on the trip,
Mm-hmm.
and when we visit universities, they would send the girls to the girls section and the guys to the guys section. So it was very interesting. It was very segregated. But as women, we would walk in and we would ask, the first questions we would ask are, well, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And then we would immediately assume, well, like when they would say, I want to be a doctor, maybe. And the first question after that would be, and then they would say, but I also want to get married, or I want to have kids. And our follow-up questions would often be very, kind of, not harsh, but they would be very like, well, why? I don't understand. Like, why is that? How can you do both? Or things that were, or maybe I want to be a doctor, but what is your goal when you graduate? I want to get married. Well, why are you studying that then? Kind of just assuming that there was no reason for them to, like, why, if you just want to get married, well, why are you doing that? And it was more of a harsh response to them, I think, than the open and honesty I was talking about, the openness. Yeah. I don't know, it's not a perfect example because I don't really remember like an exact conversation, but a lot of those initial ones, I think we kind of came in very like, combative.
Yeah, that's a good example.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You were talking about preconceived ideas that you had going there. Do you feel that people there had preconceived ideas of the American students?
Definitely.
And
Yeah.
what was the feeling?
It was interesting because okay, so there's the funny ones, like they all thought we like loved McDonald's and, watched a bunch of TV and never went outside. Obviously that's not true, but they had a lot of, what I was talking about family earlier, they just didn't understand, at that point in my life, I lived at home with my parents that year, and so when I would tell them I lived at home, they were very surprised. Like, oh, you live at home? That's weird. They just assumed that every, American student, when you turned 18, you left the home and you never saw your parents again because they see us on TV. They move to the big city and they're going to go find subs or whatever. And that's definitely not true. And I think a lot of West Michigan, we're pretty familiar with that. A lot of people live at home still or are close to their families. I think that's probably the biggest one. And they also thought a lot, they had ideas, especially with women, what they thought we were going to be like. They were surprised that we were okay wearing the outfit, the abaya and the hijab. They were very surprised. And then when we kind of, as time went on, I said I got more comfortable with it as we talked to them. They would always ask us, well, what's your opinion of that, or what's your impression, or how do you feel in it? And as time went on, we all felt a little bit more comfortable. Maybe we wouldn't, we didn't understand the religious view, or I wouldn't wear it at home because it doesn't fit in this culture. It's not what I'm comfortable with, and it's not something I believe. But I didn't feel awkward, and I said, well, I can see the benefits, and I can see why you like it. So I think that they came in with a lot of ideas of how we would react or what we did when we were kids, I guess.
So I think I'll be making some points that Lizzie made. I think actually this will sort of fit well. So again, my name is, if I haven't spoken with any of you, my name is Joe Hogan. And like Lizzie, I'll be talking about civil discourse and common ground as it relates to leadership. And I'll sort of be starting my talk off sort of far afield, and then I'll bring it back, so just bear with me. This is my last semester at Grand Valley. I'm an undergrad at Grand Valley. And as a result, I've sort of been asked to reflect on my time at Grand Valley. And I find that I keep coming back to the same passage from one of my favorite memoirs. It's written by one of my favorite literary critics. His name is Wayne Booth, and he calls his autobiography My Many Selves, A Quest for Plausible Harmony. And what he does in this book, I think is sort of brilliant. He doesn't lay out his life chronologically. Instead, he commits chapters to certain sort of splits in him, sort of splits in his personality. So for instance, one chapter is called The Pious Moralist Confronts the Cheater. Another chapter is called something like The Academic Confronts the Peasant, or something like that. And it's really sort of brilliant because what he does is he says, okay, these are some sort of urges or inclinations or selves that I have in my life. And a lot of times they sort of come into conflict. But at certain important moments in his life, they sort of harmonize or synthesize. And these are when he's being the most sort of Wayne Booth. I think this is really good, and I can apply it to my time at Grand Valley and also to my time in the Cook Leadership Academy, because I find that a lot of what I'm doing is just sort of trying to synthesize or harmonize various inclinations in me. I think we do this all the time. For instance, think of just a student who comes in and she's really interested in animals, but she's also really interested in medicine. So maybe she decides to study veterinary sciences, she finds her vocation, she sort of pursues this idea of self-actualization, and this is her harmonizing these two selves. And as I said, I think I've been able to do this a lot at Grand Valley, except I think for one split. I think I can synthesize this split in myself. The problem is, how do I sort of convey the synthesis to others, to a society that I think is sort of, in a way, sort of doesn't see these two selves as going together? Put bluntly, it's the split in me between the sort of intellectual side, the academic one, the one that's interested in the liberal arts and the humanities, and then the religious side. I'm Catholic. I was raised Catholic, and I'm very much interested in sort of my religious tradition. Now, I don't find this hard to harmonize in myself. I think I do this every day. The difficulty is, how do I convey this harmony or synthesis to a world, to a society that doesn't seem to like this idea of sort of reconciling the two. And if we can think back, just recently there was that Ken Ham, Bill Nye debate. Whoever put that together obviously wasn't really interested in a synthesis, because they put two people together who really weren't going to come to common ground or harmony. It did seem like a lot of what they did was just further define how the two views oppose each other. What I'm interested in doing, and what I've tried to do at Grand Valley, and I'll talk about this, is try to come to a sort of synthesis of these two things. This has been difficult, again, not in me, but in trying to convey this to the outside world, because these two groups, these two ideas do seem sort of different or disparate, like they're not going to get along. And this image of trying to pursue a sort of plausible harmony of two sort of different things is the image of civil discourse that I'd like to sort of present to you in this talk. And also I'll talk a bit about some conclusions that I've come to based on my time at Grand Valley and the things that I've been doing with respect to this topic. First is when you're really sort of trying to become a leader in civil discourse and common ground debate, the important thing to do is first to resist ideological entrenchment. And I'll talk about that a bit, and I think it relates to a lot of what Lizzie's been talking about. Second, I'm going to talk about the product of this resistance to ideological entrenchment, and it is a kind of a need to embrace vulnerability in debate. That I'll explain what I mean about that too. And then third, I'll sort of conclude on how these relate to each other and what this means for leadership in civil discourse. So first, ideological entrenchment. What do I mean by this? I think, again, Lizzie talked a lot about it in her talk, but it's sort of a refusal to look at a topic or an issue from another person's perspective because one is so deeply entrenched in one's own worldview. Obviously, we can all have beliefs and ideas. This is absolutely necessary. What I'm talking about is being so deeply involved in your own idea, so deeply, intensely committed to it, that you can't see from another person's perspective. Okay, so ideological entrenchment. When I came to Grand Valley is when I first started noticing this sort of this split between the religious and the academic. I first started talking about it with another CLA fellow, Lizzie, when we first came here. And what we noticed was a lot of, specifically religious students, someone who comes from any system of belief, when they come in, a lot of times they have a difficulty articulating what they think the differences are between their religious worldview and the one that they're sort of encountering in college. And a lot of times what they feel, it seems like, and I've asked a lot of my friends and peers about this, and they report this, is that the difficulty is in feeling like you will just be met with derision if you start talking about your religious ideas and trying to sort of haggle with them and understand how they relate to academic ideas. So a result that happens is sort of cognitive dissonance, I think, with a lot of students. They come in and they sort of entrench themselves in their religious worldview, and they say, academics, you can't touch me here. I'm safe in this. Or they come in and they're not really maybe happy with their religious tradition or something, and so they entrench themselves in their academic worldview. Now, obviously, when you come to college, you can change your beliefs. That's fine. I don't think anyone can be opposed to that. What the issue is I think we sort of work in a culture that, because it doesn't want to have a very honest conversation about religion and academics or intellectualism, a lot of people really just close down, and they don't want to have the conversation. And this is the kind of entrenchment that I'm talking about. So Lizzie and I, when we were discussing this, we saw that it was a sort of very touchy issue, but we really wanted to address it. And so we thought, what can we do about this? Well, since we come from a Catholic tradition, one thing we thought we could do is try to get a sort of group going between Catholic professors, administrators, and students to address this outside of the classroom. Obviously, in a public university, there are some issues that some professors feel like they probably shouldn't bring up their religious views, and I think this is absolutely valid. But I still think a lot of students might want to talk about it. So we thought, how about just a group that's outside of the classroom? But the thing that we needed to do was find Catholic professors. We knew about 2 of them, and one wears a habit and is a Franciscan sister, right? So we needed to find them, and so Lizzie had this sort of, I still think it's a sort of wacko idea. It just ended up working. She said, well, why don't we just go with our gut? Why don't we just, we hear a professor talk, we think, that sounds sort of Catholic. And then just sort of confront them in their offices or something. And I was like, I don't want to do this at all. But she sort of twisted my arm, so we started doing this. And we actually got like 40 to 50 Catholic professors from a variety of disciplines to join this group and to commit to it in some way. And when we would go into their offices, it was very interesting. When we proposed the group, they were simultaneously intrigued by it and sort of horrified by it. And the way they were horrified by it, I think, is very interesting and very telling. I pressed them on it, and when I brought up the topic of religion in their office, they asked me to close the door. This was across the board, and Lizzie said this happened too. And the reason they asked me to close the door, they said, is because they did feel a sense of ideological entrenchment at the university. And it was sort of shocking because I found out there were so many religious professors, not just Catholic, obviously, but by investigating this, I found out that there were a lot of just professors from other religions, right, who were at the university. But many of them did feel like they couldn't be open about it and even identify with it, and that if they did, their academic reputations were somehow at stake. This was very troubling to me. And I pressed them further on it, and they all reported experiencing the same thing. And I think this can be generalized outside of religion to almost any kind of acrimonious or sort of typically hateful debate. It's what a French philosopher calls the hermeneutics of suspicion. I'll whittle it down to this. It's in argument, attacking a person's, this is like ad hominem attack, attacking a person's character rather than their ideas. So let me go with a sort of neutral example. Let's say you're in class and you had this professor and you just think, gosh, I really don't understand this professor. And so you go home and you're thinking about why you don't understand the professor, and you walk into your roommate and you say, I don't know if this professor's really working for me. He never gets my papers back on time, and when he does, there's not really many comments, so I can't make use of his comments. And then I think he's also sort of unfair grader, and I have some evidence for this. Okay, so the roommate, this happens a lot. The roommate, instead of addressing the person's arguments, right, going to each point and saying, I don't think you're right about this, let's talk about it. The roommate just says, I think you don't like your professor because you got a bad grade that one time and so you're spiteful. Right? This is the person, instead of addressing the arguments, sort of going around the arguments and a sort of attacking a hidden motive that they think they found in the person. This happens all the time, and I think it really is debilitating to debate. Let me give you another example. Let's go with the topic of religion, but let's expand it to just a belief in some sort of supreme being. It doesn't have to be Judeo-Christian or anything like that. Let's say someone says, I believe in a supreme being for these reasons, right? These intellectual reasons. A lot of times what we see, and this happens a lot in, I think, academia too, is instead of addressing the arguments, someone just says, you just believe in God because you want your wishes for this universe to be fulfilled. You want to feel okay, right? You don't want to despair over life, so you just make up something, it's called God, and you make up excuses for it. Now, regardless of whether or not this kind of thing is true, right, this sort of critique is true, what it does is it attacks character and not arguments. And because it does that, it further entrenches people in their worldviews. They feel attacked by the other side, and so they stick themselves in here, and they categorically dismiss the other side. They say, you're wrong, I know you're wrong, I'm not even going to address your arguments. Let's think about government, too. I think this can be generalized to government. A lot of times, if anyone goes on YouTube, you see this in the comments section. Someone will make, let's say, I'll use this example. It goes both ways, I think. But one example, let's say a conservative person, a person of the right, makes some argument for free market capitalism. I like free market capitalism. I think it's a good economic system for these reasons. Someone on the left, I think I see this a lot. Again, it goes both ways, but I think I see this a lot. They'll say, instead of addressing the arguments, they'll say, you just like capitalism because it lets you keep the money. This, regardless of whether that's that's in any way true or plausible, what it does is it closes off conversation and it forces people to be more entrenched in their views. And this is the thing I think we have to sort of ditch, we have to sort of abandon if we're going to be leaders in civil discourse that seeks common ground. We can't do that. Okay, so if we ditch ideological entrenchment, what's next? Well, it's this notion that I said of embracing vulnerability. What do I mean there? Here's an example of the group. So when I first proposed the group to this Catholic group, what I wanted to do and what Lizzie wanted to do, and Noah joined and what he wanted to do too, is just bring students, professors, and administrators again together to just debate about things that they can't really debate about, to be very honest with their views, to let sort of their religious ideas and their academic ideas both be susceptible to a lot of honest critique. That can't happen when we're just sort of ideologically entrenched. And when I proposed this group to professors who I knew weren't Catholic, probably weren't religious at all, sometimes I was met with a sort of harsh criticism. It was, Joe, this is never going to work. Religion and the academy aren't good bedfellows. They're not going to get along. So you really should just abandon it because you're starting off on the wrong foot. This was difficult for me, not just because I was being critiqued by professors I respected. This happens a lot. Instead, it was that I was sort of allowing the two deeply held beliefs that I have. That I'm very interested in my Catholic tradition, but I'm also very interested in the humanities and intellectualism and academia and what that can do for the world. And I was allowing these things to sort of come out of come out of my sort of stomach. They're sort of nestled in my stomach, and so when they're attacked, it feels like I'm being punched, right? Allow them to sort of come out and interact in ways that are, in a way, sort of dangerous, sort of radically dangerous, and that I had to leave myself open to honest change in myself and in my ideas. And this was the only way I could approach it honestly. And a lot of times we don't want to do this. Again, in government, we see this especially today. I think a lot of with the federal government stuff. We see just ideological entrenchment, where people really don't want to have their most deeply held views critiqued. And so again, they categorically dismiss another side. They say, we're not even going to have the conversation. I know you're wrong. I'm not even going to entertain it. We need to, again, embrace vulnerability because it allows us to really see two sides of an argument and really understand it. Now, again, I'm going to generalize from here. How can this affect the way we are sort of leaders in civil discourse and common ground debate? Well, one, I think it has a practical effect. If we resist ideological entrenchment and embrace vulnerability, then when we go into debate, we have to see both sides. We have to understand the nuances of each side's arguments. Not just a sort of cursory knowledge of their arguments, but a real deep understanding of what each side believes and the reasons why they believe this. The practical effect is this: we'll be very good rhetoricians, we'll be very good debaters and leaders of debate. If we know each side sort of in almost better than they know themselves, better than they know their own arguments, then we'll be really masterful debaters, and this will inspire trust in us, and so there's a practical effect for our leadership. Right? Now, this is a good thing as leaders that we can have, is being good debaters. There's a much more important consequence of this. If we internalize the views of both sides of any debate, especially difficult ones like religion and the academy, and also government, the left and the right, if we do this, if we sort of really do pursue this idea of a plausible harmony of two really disparate things, if we do this and if we internalize everyone's sort of beliefs, if we let them sort of interact and sort of, again, enter our gut, really move around in there and interact with our other beliefs and really change the way we view the world, even if we stick with our own beliefs, again, I think they'll become stronger if we do allow them to interact with other ones. Even if we stick with our own beliefs, then we have to be truly empathetic people. We have to identify the fundamental humanity of everyone who's engaged in the debate. This won't let, I think Lizzie is making this very point, this won't let us be ideologically entrenched. This will force us to be good leaders in civil discourse and debate because we will have to understand, again, the fundamental humanity of everyone. And so we won't lead lead groups into acrimonious debate, but instead really constructive debate that leads to common ground. And so that's it.
I have a question for you. Do you think that comment sections on online blogs or posts, like dividing articles, further create that? Because a lot of what you see is, ideological enhancement.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what you see is quick jabs at each other, and you can do that on an online forum because you're not in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you read any online comment section, the comments are terrible every time. So I mean, do you think that further entrenches people because it's always attacking? It's not usually argument that points back and forth.
Yeah, you look at that stuff, and I think it does relate to this notion of not identifying the fundamental humanity of other people. I think this sort of goes with, in YouTube comment sections, you're just not looking at the person.
Right.
So I think that is very important. But also, I think you're right when you call them jabs. I think that's exactly what they are. They just come from, again, categorically dismissing another side. I've got these ready-made jabs here that I'm just waiting to sort of bring into this debate, and no matter what you say, I'm just going to use them. I'm just going to sort of attack your character. This happens all the time, and so that's why I think a lot of people are sort of revulsed by YouTube comment sections.
Yeah, and everyone can read it. I mean, it's on the internet. Anyone can read it.
Exactly. And so I think it does have an adverse effect on the way we do civil discourse. Yeah.
Have any of the professors or students in this program expanded it to another university or another city and maybe see that location or at the university?
Lizzie,
Are you seeing like either the same problems or different problems?
well, Lizzie again is the one with the wacko ideas. She was like, "Let's globalize this immediately." so we have friends at U of M and MSU, and especially the one at U of M. It does seem like he's met more difficulty. I think geographic location might have something to do with that. But also, if you're going to do something like this, you really got to commit to it because, again, there's an intense amount of vulnerability that comes to it. I think it will work. If there are so many professors here who are sort of hiding the fact that they have any sort of religious worldview at all, right, or any sort of belief system, I think that indicates that that's probably likely at other universities. And also, especially here, a lot of the professors expressed that they felt like this was sort of a long time coming. Like they really have to have the discussion. And so I think at other colleges, and I think even around the world probably, I think people are really hoping to have a discussion like this. So, yeah.
I enjoyed your talk very much, especially or particularly the points you made relevant to common ground. Would you please expand on what you mean by vulnerability? Are you saying that you're willing to throw your deeply held beliefs out there? Or are you talking about personally vulnerable in front of a group?
So this is, I'll relate to my Catholic tradition. I think this can be generalized, but a lot of times I read, if any of you are familiar with a saint, St. Augustine, he says, to understand you must first believe. And that doesn't necessarily have to relate to anyone's views, right? But for me, that sort of means, okay, so I have religious ideas. These are very difficult to understand. I sort of assent to them. And so I know that when I go into debate, I want them to be sort of really critiqued so that I understand them. I don't go into debate sort of saying, I'm just, if someone gives a really good argument against my religion, I'm just going to ditch it. I think what I mean is you go in allowing yourself to be vulnerable to critique in a way that won't let you be entrenched, that you'll really have to understand what people are saying to you. But at the same time, again, I think I see what you're saying. I don't think that means just sort of every time you go out just say, well, I'm just sort of juggling these things, and if someone says something really good against my religion, then I'm just going to ditch it. I don't think that's true too. I think you need to strike a balance. I think it's difficult to strike, but yeah, no.
Yeah, so I have this is kind of a tough one, so I'll give you an option here. So if you were like in charge of Grand Valley or any other institution like Grant College, like tomorrow, so are there any practical steps that you would take to help kind of eradicate some of this entrenchment? And if you can't think of that, what can we do as students to kind of help eradicate entrenchment at a smaller level?
I think those two are related for me. I think the entrenchment is sort of endemic. I think it's obviously not just a problem at Grand Valley. It has to do with, I think, the way we as a culture discuss issues like this. So the practical steps that I think students might be able to take at Grand Valley is, I think, just precisely what we're trying to do, which is open it up for discussion in any way that you can. Sometimes this can't happen in the classroom. And I think that's valid. Again, religious beliefs, especially at a public university, I think there's a problem there in bringing them up with professors and sort of bringing them up a lot. Because I think it does, again, I feel sort of alienated as a Catholic sometimes, but again, I completely acknowledge that if a lot of professors talked about their religion, then other people would feel equally as alienated, and this is obviously a problem in any case. What I think ought to be done by students is, if they feel like in some sense serious discourse that isn't reaching common ground, isn't being addressed at their school, then they ought to just try to start the groups that Lizzie, you and I started, which is just groups who are outside of the classroom. They can just open up for discussion. Yeah.
So I'm going to throw you another curveball. I appreciate your insights. So often people will have subjective, ulterior motives in bringing up an argument. So when they have those subjective arguments and they refuse to objectify or give the appearance of objectifying their arguments, how do you attempt to engage in civil discourse?
Do you mean the kind of thing that's like, I have my opinion and you have your opinion, and so we're just fine and dandy with our own opinions?
I'm thinking more of like a businessman who might have an interest in an area, and so he argues for this other area.
Could you give me a more specific example?
So, I don't know, a guy in procurement has a contact in some business and he wants a company to go with that company, even though it's better to go with this other company. But he'll give a really great argument why you should go with his company, basically.
The only thing that anyone, I think, can do there is just identify. Okay, so when I was talking about this hermeneutics of suspicion, I don't mean that the hidden motives don't exist. I think some people do believe things because maybe it makes them feel better or something. I think that's true. I think constantly jumping to that in argument is the wrong way to go. So I think with this instance, if you can clearly identify the hidden motive, I think we do this all the time too, it's very practical. If you can clearly identify the hidden motive, call attention to it, say, I think this is really what's going on here, but let's get back to the arguments. And that is when it's necessary to just be a really good debater, because then you really have to, if it would actually, in this instance, if it is actually better to go with the other company, then you will end up being able to come up with a better argument, right, I think. That's difficult though, so I don't think there's a real clear-cut answer. But, yeah.
Do you think that this issue actually addresses back to not only higher education, but even starting with kindergarten, first grade, and how the classrooms are structured, and that they don't ever open up for debate, so we aren't accustomed to having our own ideas challenged, and then trying to put ourselves in other people's shoes as well? This
is getting into really difficult territory, because I know what you're talking about, and I think a lot of times with kindergarten on up, I think we try to approach a lot of education as if we're not forcing a sort of worldview on any children, right? And I think that's necessarily impossible. So I think the most important thing is to have a sort of a system of education. This is obviously difficult to I'm talking about like changing education. I have no experience in this at all. I'm just sort of shooting from the hip here or whatever. I do think I have thought about this, and I think I just thought about this in my own potential parenting if I'm blessed with kids, and that is I think I'd like to focus a lot on debate, because in any situation we're going to be confronted with, I think, worldviews that aren't obvious. I think as a religious person, I'm able to see this in a particular way, because I see how, even though, and this is my experience and this is my opinion, but I think a lot of times when we say, we're not, by not bringing up religion, I think a lot of times we somehow suggest that it ought not be brought up ever. And so I sometimes I feel like I'm confronting a worldview that no one is addressing is really there, but that is there. And I think the most important thing is as a parent, I just hope I plan to teach my kids how really to debate and address these things. Again, because I think it has to be an education. I think there has to be some worldview involved that might encourage ideological entrenchment. But again, this just comes with understanding the fundamental humanity of others and resisting the ideological entrenchment. Yeah. But again, I'm just, I haven't studied education. So, yeah.
Just to add on that, I think this generation, if we want to make a difference in future generations, I think I challenge everybody in here who is a parent or is going to be a parent to start instilling those into the children, because most of these things, most of the ideas, I believe, most of them start from the foundation. How are we raised up? And if we don't make that difference in the children we're raising, or our cousins, our nieces, nephews, and the children we're going to have, I think it will keep, the cycle might keep going on and on and on. And it will take ages, it will take a very long time to see that difference. For example, Grand Valley is a great institution and it has one of the best cultural diversity department. But just the other day, actually on Monday when I went to the office, my supervisor forwarded to me an email of the incident that took place over the weekend, and I thought, wow, because she understands my values, what I believe, and I'm very open to discussing what I feel and the thoughts, the way I look at things and my perspective. So when things happen like that, she's not afraid to share with me and let me know what goes on. So lots of these also just come from the fact that we were raised differently, and it's not something that can be easily erased off at once. But I think I do agree with you, the fact that trying to bring people together and helping them understand that outside that institution that has all these policies, they can still meet somewhere or be able to agree and share their views and ideas about their personal life, their religious beliefs, without feeling like they're being judged. I work with an organization that is a Christian, but majority, I think 80% of our clients are actually non-Christians. And one thing I learned was that when the organization got the building we were in, there were lots of arguments, and finally they had to come to an agreement that having a courtesy room, it's not just for our clients who are non-Christians, but we also use it as Christians. You can go there anytime, say a prayer, just relax, or if you feel like you've had a confrontation with a client and you just want to take a few minutes to go take a breather, you can go to the courtesy room and use it. But also we direct our clients, the non-Christian clients who need that time to do their prayer and time and other things, to that room and use it. So it's really broad, and I think I truly appreciate what you're sharing today.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, yeah.
I was wondering if you could touch on, in the program that you and Lizzie implemented at Grand Valley, and through the various lectures that you guys held in the mentorship kind of meetings, what were some of the transformations that you witnessed in students or the professors who were in it, right? Because we talked about how initially, right, they closed the door immediately. Was there any change in that, or what were the things that were taking place within the group itself?
There's still, so the group is young. Thanks, Amy. I think that these are important points to make too. The group is young, and so I think a lot of people still, they want to have the discussion in the room, right? But then outside, I don't think people are just sort of walking out and saying, just debating with anyone they walk in. Right? I don't think that's it. What has happened, though, is I think some people really have embraced this notion of vulnerability, and that when they enter discussion about, academics and their religion, right? They are willing to sort of entertain possibilities in a sense, to sort of see from different worldviews. I think that's the good effect. I think a lot of, especially the professors, not only, many of them are Catholic, but obviously they have many other different views. The difficulty is, when they debate, they try to understand, okay, well, if you're Catholic, then you probably should believe this about politics. And that's where it gets that's where I think the real common ground comes in those debates, is that a lot of them come from, the left or the right? And they really have to mingle, and they really have to talk these out. And because already the group's emphasis is on understanding this common ground in terms of religion in the academy, they're already going in with that emphasis. And I think it's a change in perspective that really it's almost cathartic for a lot of people, I think. So, yeah. And then, yeah.
Do you have any friends at like private institutions that are religious, like a Calvin College or a Hope College? And if so, do you have any insight on whether those types of places have more opportunity for discussion and civil discourse, or almost less because there's less challenge, less opposition?
The group that we sort of started actually has a kind of precedent. It's a little different, but it was started at places like Yale, I think, and a couple others, right, Lizzie? And Notre Dame also has something like this. I gotta imagine Calvin and Hope and places like that have groups like this. Although we have a friend at Georgetown, right, which is a Catholic private institution, and he has sort of expressed that he still thinks that there is a need for a group like this. That even at private institutions, I don't think the point is at public institutions, religious people are just sort of completely ostracized and alienated, right? So they need a group like this. I think it goes on a sort of spectrum, and I think even at private institutions, stuff like this probably needs to happen. So that answers your question.
All right.
So I'm going to take this to the local government level. If there's any of you here that don't know me, one of my dominant passions is local government, urban planning, and this is kind of specifically how I got into that. I got a Bachelor's of Science in Geography and Urban Planning from Grand Valley, and I'm currently in the MPA program. I work with an organization that works a lot with local governments, particularly with planning, transportation, things like that. I attend a lot of public meetings, and so kind of gives a background of where I come from. In the beginning, so in 2010, in the fall, I was a junior. There was a student who on Pierce Street got hit by a bike. I don't know if any of you remember this. I ended up finding out later that it was kind of his fault because he pulled on front of the car, but regardless, it's kind of started the discussion in my mind of, well, there's not really any bike lanes on Pierce Street or 52nd or 48th Avenue. And, that's kind of a problem. There's not really a way to get on campus except for by car or by bus. And then the West Campus Drive, of course, has a bike lane or walkway on it. But what about outside of campus? The universities done a good job on campus for the most part, but what about off campus? And where does that discussion begin? Multiple other students have been hit that year. I think there was half a dozen or so. I can't remember it off the top of my head now, on and off campus. So it led me to start a group with a friend of mine who is actually a friend of his that was hit by the bike, GVSU Students for Sidewalks. It kind of started off as I'm going to start this group and see how much attention I get. It blew up really quickly. In a matter of a week, we had 2,000, 3,000 people that were members of the group. I started getting calls from MLive, or Grand Rapids Press, the Lanthorn, the university, Allendale, kind of asking me, what are you doing with this? Where are you going with it? What are you involved in now? And I really had no idea. I didn't know where it would go at the time. I was kind of thrown into, what do you, how are you gonna address this? So I had people giving me ideas, shooting emails, wanting to meet with me. So I started giving it, more thought. Anyway, also I wasn't sure if I wanted to get involved too much with my name. I was worried that if I started pushing buttons or pushing things, that my name might be attached to something negative, or that I might get myself into something I don't necessarily want to be in. I decided I would go along with it anyway, so anyway, the issue, again, is the lack of walkability and sidewalks in and around Grand Valley. What I started to notice when I started getting online chats and online forums, which is where that question came from before, is that when these articles were posted about me or about other articles regarding the university and students, you had a lot of backlash from the community in terms of a lot of Allendale residents, specifically vocal ones. Not all of them were like this, but at the same time, many of them were overly vocal, and some of them, get ad hominem attacks, like he was discussing, and they weren't discussing the issue at hand. What I want to do is I'm going to break down into the different kind of groups or categories that people are kind of entrenched in. So we have the students. You have growing experiences, education. You come to college. You have a more active lifestyle than a lot of older adults do. Maybe more progressive in nature. You stay up later. You have more social activities, depending on what that is. So you have this very active group lifestyle. You also have the residents, who many times they live in a suburb of a larger city. They're looking to maybe get away from activity. They want to raise a family. They want to, they may have more conservative ideals. They're older. Things of this nature. Maybe they don't remember their college experience. They don't remember what it was like to be in college, to want to learn, to want to grow. But anyway, I'm on to the township. So the township's louder tax-paying base, their constituents, the residents of their homes, homeowners, business owners, they're the ones who attend meetings. The one thing I started noticing when I started going to meetings, when I was asked by Jerry Elkema, the township supervisor, to attend a meeting, kind of maybe get an idea for what they're talking about, maybe give some input. There were no other students there. I was the only one. He mentioned that the student senate had a liaison on and off that he had met with, but that there wasn't really a presence at any of these meetings. So the township itself wasn't seeing, the residents themselves, the ones that attend the meetings, the ones that are vocal, weren't seeing students attend any of these meetings or give any input. So they one of their larger points was that, students don't care. They're just transient. They're going to only be here for 4 years. They don't care about the community. Why do we want to invest in money, or why do people want to build student housing for these students if they're going to be here? There's going to be a hassle for me, cause more traffic. Be loud, rowdy. Some of them at the time were, they were. We don't want couch burnings like MSU. We don't want things of this nature. And they're kind of scared that they're worried about their their property values. They're more adult sounding concerns. So I started getting a few others, and in talking to Student Senate actually sent a large group of people to one of their public meetings for the new master plan. So that kind of got in discussion. I'll get back to that later, though. The university, so in my contact with the university, they didn't really want to get involved with the local politics in Allendale. It's understandable, but at the same time, I was hoping that there would be a little bit more of a response from them. Student Senate was more involved or more willing to work with me, I think, than some at the university were. However, things have changed, or changed quickly after this, and I'll get to that in a minute as well. So, the community common ground. The one thing that I noticed about the groups at the table when I was in these meetings was that everyone was kind of trying to live their lifestyle. The students were trying to get through college. The residents were just trying to raise a family. They were trying to work. Both had concerns of their immediate self. I can't run down the side of 48th Avenue, or the resident. I want to be able to have my windows open at night when I'm sleeping and not have to listen to loud music from the apartment complexes across the road. You had people that are just trying to live their lives, and their conflicting lifestyles cause a lot of issues. So the community, the residents, particularly with student housing, are very against high density traffic and whatnot. This is where my planning background kind of came in. I started realizing, well, not everyone dismisses zoning or planning. They want to use it for different reasons. The residents want to use it to keep people away. The students, the ones that showed up to the meeting, they want sidewalks, they want walkability, they want to be able to go to a restaurant or a bar at the corner. They want traditional college town lifestyle. When we started discussing some of this at the master planning meetings that I attended, we kind of came to the conclusion that, well, maybe there needs to be two distinct centers of Allendale. You have a center downtown that's maybe further away from campus, and another downtown that's in amongst the students that kind of maybe that each can kind of visit but don't really collide with each other as much. This hasn't really gone on much farther than the discussion in the master plan. I'm not sure where it's at now, to be honest, with it since it's been approved. But anyway, also everyone kind of wants success, but they don't really, They want their idea to succeed, but they're not really sure which group, how to react with the other group. The university kind of took a lead. Later on, I believe 2011, 2012, it started a sidewalk discussion on campus, and begins with off-campus walkability. These types of studies. Again, at this time, instead of the students not going to the community meeting, the community wasn't really coming to the students' meeting on campus. So we didn't really have besides the township supervisor, we didn't really have crossover. They kind of stayed away. And that us and them mentality is what I was seeing. Like, well, I'm not going to go to their event, and we're not going to go to ours. We're going to stay, where we're comfortable. Later on, we had a new planning professor in the geography and planning department named Patricia Hauser. She became a little more vocal. She didn't also understand some of the background with the local analytic politics. So she started. She organized a transportation planning panel to discuss 48th Avenue and brought in the township supervisor, somebody from the university, and a bike organization from Grand Rapids, and a couple of students, and kind of had them sit on a panel, and everyone shared their ideas. At times, it got a little bit. I didn't know this going into the meeting, but there was a bit of previous hatred towards a few of the people that were on the panel, specifically MDOT and the bike organization. So that the discussion when it got to them to speak didn't really continue the discussion the way I hoped that I thought it would. It was a lot of them bickering back and forth. And I think that kind of polarized the room. It didn't really get anywhere. A lot of my experience, I bring this back to personally, it kind of led into my decision as a profession to kind of continue on with this. And also that I will have to continue to deal with these sort of situations in local politics, in the room with, you have different constituents, different groups, but that the university kind of is a base for my experience coming through and learning about, when you have two polarized opposite groups that are very, very different, and how that, trying to tie them together isn't always successful, but kind of trying to get them to talk or give them an option to do so is really where it needs to begin. But
expand just outside of Allendale, but also into Grand Rapids area? I know around Aquinas College we don't always have sidewalks, so it's difficult for us to get from one place to another place, or to even go out and grab food at night. So I was curious if you had heard talk about more sidewalks, or trying to get sidewalks outside of Allendale.
So the issue is that the existing kind of tax-paying base, the residents, the homeowners, don't really want to spend money on the students. And they kind of say, well, they're not here for very long, so why should we spend money on people that aren't going to really contribute to our community? That was kind of their idea, at least what they were saying at some of the meetings. So I think that there's more of a push now that students are, or at least Student Senate was involved, and that there's this kind of happened, that the township realizes that this is important, and that they we're people too in the township, that we contribute.
Did you have any experience or insight in the, process of approval for the new Grand Village apartments that are on the corner of First and 52nd?
I did not. I don't know if that's being connected or tied in any way. Again, I don't think very much has happened since I kind of left this off a few years ago when I moved downtown and started grad school. But there was conversation that they would start requiring this sort of things, especially walkability around GVSU, because we are more of a pedestrian type of population. We are bikes, we run, versus and some people on campus don't have cars. So I know that discussion was started, that not just on campus but off campus, that they would begin to incorporate that into their zoning ordinance or into other ordinances that would require walkability. But again, I don't know how Grand Villages went. I know they were trying to tie a bus in, but That's been another issue. The university and some in the Rapid want to tie the Rapid into the rest of Allendale, but the residents aren't necessarily okay with that or willing.
Yeah, so in what ways do you feel, or I guess to what extent do you feel that your preconceptions about Allendale residents, homeowners, and so on changed with your interactions with them?
I was actually pretty surprised. So a lot of them, I kind of had preconceived ideas of the type of people that they would be. I came from a smaller town, so I kind of had that picture in mind. But I didn't notice there's actually quite a different group of people, at least that came to the meetings. One of the leadership in the Center for Inquiry was in Allendale, which I didn't know until, and he was very vocal against some of the student housing encroaching upon his property or being nearby. So I realized that there was kind of a variety of people in that mix, and that the fear of students or the fear of encroachment of students kind of brought them together, and that was kind of an interesting dynamic.
You talked about the fact that you've got these two groups there, and those situations go on throughout our lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
What did you learn from this one that you would do the next time to bring the two groups closer together?
So I kind of at first learned more about how attacking, when I was being attacked by some of the residents for being just a young kid who doesn't understand what you want later on in life, that I started realizing, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by that? Why what do you mean I don't understand? And that we really needed to kind of maybe figure out why they don't want they don't want the students, and why I want, and kind of maybe see if there's, I guess, less attacking each other and less name calling, like you're just a student or you're just a resident, and trying to maybe come to a meeting of the minds, and well, we're going to be here and you're going to be here, so how do we work this out? How do we move on? And I didn't get very far with this when I was there, but really, not having a preconceived notion of that person, and not just jumping to conclusions when speaking with them about what you think they might want or what they say they might want.
Nathan, first of all, thanks for taking us through your own professional and personal experience with this. Did you come away with this thinking that, are you more optimistic or more pessimistic about how we get civic groups with really contrasting contingents to work together?
It actually depended on the group that was there. It actually changed. It changed from meeting to meeting. It depended on who went. We had a really great group of the student senate that showed up that worked really well. I mean, they split each other up on purpose at the tables for the charrette sessions, with the planning commission and planning groups, and everyone kind of got along. And then we had this one group of residents that kind of stayed at their own table and didn't really talk to anyone, and were very outspoken in kind of the stand up and discuss your ideas session against students completely being there. And we were a huge hassle to be in town, and to have any interaction with the community at all. So, but at the same time, I mean, it depended again from meeting to meeting. I'm more optimistic. I think that as the university's young in comparison, so there are some people who still live there that remember it not being there. And so as the university ages, that will change. If more people get used to us being there.
This is kind of a leading question, so I apologize in advance. But I think it's interesting when we look at local communities and the fact that we're both residing here together, that it seemed like when you were talking about the meetings, we were talking about issue-specific things, right? So about sidewalks and things like that, there was a lot of confrontation, and a lot that came from misunderstandings of how we live and different values and things like that. And so how do you think, outside of perhaps an issue-specific thing, that we could build more common ground as a community?
One thing I tried to start when I ended up getting an internship at the township after this towards my senior year. I tried to start at some of the universities, because there's a lot of town and gown relations in a lot of communities, not just Allendale and GDSU. I mean, East Lansing and Michigan State Universities, Ann Arbor, and so on and so forth. But some universities have a student liaison that's almost like a honorary position on the city council or a planning commission to kind of weigh in on student concerns, so that there's a voice at every meeting. Because students are busy. A lot of them, unless they're forced to, don't really want to go to these meetings. But having kind of maybe that connection that's a permanent spot might begin to instill our needs into other people's minds, and so they're thinking about that, and we're not just over here doing our own thing, not communicating with that, and vice versa.
So I have two questions. One's a little easier. So I understand the argument for fiscal responsibility. We don't want to spend money to make these sidewalks.
Right.
What's the agenda beyond that? Why were people so opposed to putting in sidewalks?
They didn't want us having access to their quiet little neighborhood. That was a lot of the concern. They didn't want drunk college students walking through their neighborhood. They didn't want us riding our bikes through. There's a lot of it. To me, it was like we were a second-class society in some of these people's minds, and I was a little taken back by that. But I didn't react. I tried to react appropriately to that kind of thing. And that's kind of what I learned, like the attacking. I mean, it kind of pushed me back a little bit. Like, whoa, do I really want to be dealing with you right now? Kind of as a student, but I don't know. It was a worry. It was a worry about the unknown, or forgetting what it was like to be young.
And the second question, which you alluded to a little bit, in my own experience, I once lost a significant loss of reputation in the workplace environment, which was really scary, and all I wanted was to do the right thing. So here you all are wanting to do the right thing, but you have the community attacking you. So I'm kind of curious, what were you feeling? Did you doubt what you were doing, or did you just doubt that you wanted to do it? What were your thoughts and then your reactions to that?
I was kind of worried that I didn't really want to make any person in particular really mad at me, or give a bad name for myself. And so there's a few times where I was like, should I be really commenting on this, or should I continue on? Am I going to get myself in trouble? Kind of. I don't know. That was kind of my concern at the time. I don't know though. I kept on with it, especially after I was able to kind of get the ear of the township supervisor and kind of relay some of the concerns that I had as a student, even though I was through the 4 years since I was a senior, I had kind of a lot to share. I don't really know about it. Continue on.
Did you ever actually respond to their attack?
Not directly. I tried to attack. That was where I really learned to discuss ideas and only argue ideas versus someone else's background or their character, and what he was talking about. That's this whole situation. If I got anything out of that, it was how to argue appropriately, and really kind of take my educational background and apply it to reasoning, to